Lainey Jennings Hall, and you're listening to Speak Up Arkansas on KABF 88.3 FM. Disability Rights Arkansas is proud to be a part of KABF's weekly Speak Up Arkansas program to encourage dialogue about the issues that matter most to people with disabilities, their families, and caregivers, and to educate the public about these issues to make Arkansas a truly inclusive state where everyone's personhood and contributions are valued. This show is pre-recorded, so we won't be taking calls, but we always welcome your questions and comments. You can give us a call at 800-482-1174, or you can find us online on our website at www.disabilityrightsar.org. We're also on Facebook at Disability Rights AR, and you'll find us on Twitter at DR Arkansas. This is an important time of year for parents, students, and educators alike. It's back to school. It can also be a frustrating and scary time trying to navigate your child's Individualized Education Program, or IEP. In today's episode, I'm joined by a panel of experts to discuss the parent and child's role in the IEPs, adding transition services into the IEP, and a new proactive curriculum coming out to aid you in your IEP journey. I'm excited to be joined by Ally Thomlinson, Director of Arkansas Alliance for Disability Advocacy, Derek Henderson, attorney at Disability Rights Arkansas and former educator, Mollie Hernandez, an advocate here at Disability Rights Arkansas, former educator, and transition services extraordinaire, and finally, Kyla Bishop, attorney at Disability Rights Arkansas. Thank you all so much for joining me today. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive right in. Ally, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk a little bit about your role at Disability Rights Arkansas, as well as the IEP curriculum that you and your team have been working on?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Lainey. As everyone heard, my name is Ally Thomlinson, and I am the director of the Arkansas Alliance for Disability Advocacy. And we are funded by the Governor's Council on Developmental Disability and with Disability Rights Arkansas. Our program trains self-advocates, family members, and allies in advocacy, leadership, voting, and public policy, just anything that they need, anytime they want it. So this means that we do everything that we can to ensure that each Arkansan has the education and the tools that they need to create a life in a state powered by inclusion, equity, and respect. So what we try to do is ensure that each person has the tools that they need by creating what the people of Arkansas say that they need. And through surveying the people of our state and looking at the calls that come into our protection and advocacy agency, we have found that we need a more comprehensive and really a straightforward resource for those that are in the trenches of special education. So the Alliance, with the help of many great partners, I say that, and I mean that because we couldn't have done this without them, but we've created a robust resource guide to help family members and students with IEPs and understand just really how to, take a proactive approach in the IEP process.
Oh, that is a lot. So can you tell us a little bit what you're wanting to accomplish with the curriculum?
Definitely. So when I say the IEP trenches, I really mean that. I'm a parent of a child that has been on an IEP since they were in kindergarten, and there's no way to really prepare yourself unless you have someone set you down and try to prepare you for it. And even if then you're really not prepared, I think that all of us working in IEPs, we really know that, right? And so what we're trying to do is give parents the tools that they need to be involved. So legally, a parent is an active team member. Parents do not take their concerns to an IEP team. What they are is they're an active team member of the IEP team. So what we want them to be able to do is be actively involved and ready to take action whenever needed. So whether they're bringing concerns, whether they want to help with data tracking, anything that they want, we want them to be ready and want them to be able to take a proactive approach to the IEP process instead of taking a reactive approach. We want to make sure that parents and students alike are really successful in the entire process so students can grow to their maximum potential.
You mentioned that parents, being at the table. I want to throw it over to Derek for just a minute. Derek, you kind of have a unique perspective being in the special education world and now being at DRA. Will you talk just a little bit about parents? Do they have a hard time being active members of the IEP team?
Absolutely, that can be difficult. It can be intimidating for a parent when they come to an IEP meeting and there could be 5, 6 representatives from the district, maybe more in some cases, and that can feel kind of overwhelming. It can make parents feel like their input is not as valued as other people. It can present the idea that it's a panel decision and it's up for a vote, and it's not. It's supposed to be what Ally described. It's a collaborative process. And so that can be difficult for parents to understand their role and that they are equal and valued members of that team.
Let's pause just a minute on this curriculum. Let's talk about IEPs just a little bit. We're talking about this curriculum just to give our listeners a little bit more of an insight. Mollie, Kyla, what do y'all really want to talk about what an IEP is and how DRA can really, assist in this process?
Sure. So an IEP stands for, an individualized education plan. And so this plan is going to lay out all the support services and interventions that a child or a student might need to access, his or her education. Lainey, you made a good point earlier about how, the parent is, legally part of the team. And I think it's important to stress that, an IEP is a legal document. It is, a document created by federal statute, and it legally binds the district to provide those supports and services outlined in the IEP. Like Derek was saying, it is a collaborative process, and the decisions are made by the IEP team. So if an IEP team makes a certain decision, a principal or superintendent can't, unilaterally overrule it, so to say. So I think that's really important to stress.
I think it's important to also remember that as your child grows and changes throughout their years in public education, their IEP is also going to change. And there's going to be different components that come in there, such as a transition plan, which we're going to look at a little bit later. So just remember, it's a living, breathing document that's going to be very unique to your child and change to the needs and goals of your child.
Yeah, I love you said living and breathing. And I know also very, very thorough. Kyla, can you talk about why it needs to be so thorough?
An IEP needs to be thorough because it's supposed to address all aspects of the child's education. Pursuant to the statute, it's the IEP is supposed to include students' present level of, achievement and functional performance, how their disability affects how they progress in the general ed curriculum, what their goals are, how they're going to achieve those goals, and in what time. So it really needs to be thorough so it can account for all aspects of the child's education so that whoever receives that document knows what to do when it's all outlined in there.
Kyla, I'm so glad that you brought that up. We actually addressed that in the curriculum, and I think that that's very important for parents to know. I think that sometimes, especially when the IEP process is going very well, that we sometimes get complacent in writing things into the IEP, which makes it very hard to pass the stranger test. So when that document is supposed to be so thorough, we sometimes don't write everything in it that we're supposed to write in it or that we need to write in it to be able to hand that off. Do you all see that sometimes?
Yes, we often see, for example, maybe a behavior plan that is not as thorough as it should be. And that through a lack of an appropriate behavior plan, a child is removed from school or in some cases even restrained. And so those are the things that, need to be so detailed so that we can avoid them. But absolutely, Ally, yes, a lack of detail can be a nail in the coffin sometimes.
I definitely can agree, especially with the parents that we work with in the Alliance. We see that a lot. And the students that come to us, we unfortunately have not gained the momentum with the younger students yet, but we're always working on that. We want to create advocates out of anyone. We want to make sure that anyone has the tools, especially young individuals, right? The younger you get the tools to be a self-advocate, the more powerful you'll be. You don't have to go back and backtrack. And so we definitely want to be able to reach out and gain that momentum with younger individuals. But what we're seeing is parents who have a great relationship with these teachers or with these therapists, or these therapists and teachers that have a great relationship with the student, that educator knows that student. They know that they need this pencil gripper in English, or they know that they need a 15-minute break after lunch. They know them so well that they give that to them. But when we have a substitute come in, or if that teacher retires, those things are not written into the IEP. So that's a disservice to that student.
Yes.
Those are the exact things that we want to address in this curriculum, because when you are, like we said earlier, in those trenches, those are the little things that you're not thinking about. Those things are going right. Those things are going right. So we're not thinking about that. So if we can emphasize that to our parents and to the students that are actively involved in their IEPs, we want to make sure that that is on their radar, that we do want to have those things written down. That is a success for me. That is something that's working for me. I want it to continue to work for me. So I need it written into my IEP.
Right. And you know, Ally, to your point, I think the IDEA contemplates exactly that, you know, at, I believe it's age 16 or 14, you know, the child, you know, has to be included in the IEP meetings. And to Mollie's point, especially when it comes to transition, when we're trying to figure out, okay, what's next? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to learn a trade? Okay, well, how are we going to get that child from high school to whatever is next? And so as they get older, they become a lot more involved in, especially during the transition process.
So question, Mollie, how often do you see students involved in the IEP process before it's legally necessary for them?
Not often enough, you know, or they're present but not engaged. And that engagement is what is so key. You know, within the disability community, we really promote nothing about us without us. And at the IEP meeting, at that table, that is a safe place for these students to begin to exercise their rights, their knowledge, their just all of the self-advocacy skills that we want them to have as they go out on their own into the community. So it more than just voicing their wants, their needs, it's giving them that practice of, here I am, I'm at the table, this is my voice. You all may be here to assist me, but you're not my voice, you're my megaphone. Okay, so I want to make sure that, you know, when parents and teachers know that we want those students at the table, we want them there to practice those skills and to be powerful self-advocates as they step out into the world.
I love that. Derek, coming from the special education side, what was the impact that you saw, like the importance of this collaboration, this teamwork?
Well, it's huge because I'll go back to what Mollie said, that this is, for a lot of kids and their families, this is something that spans 10 or 12 years. It's a really long and difficult process in some ways. And you have to be in it for the long haul. You have to understand that there are some growing pains, there's some trial and error. And so it's interesting and it's fun to see over time how students develop into self-advocates. I always loved seeing that as we're getting into later high school. Hopefully you have students running their IEP meetings essentially and telling the team what they need and what's going to help them be successful and giving feedback on what has not been as successful. And so it's huge to empower families and students. And it can be difficult for the schools, I'll say, because it does introduce an element of uncertainty. But again, you have to fall back on the fact that this is a collaborative process. And so kids early on, when they first start participating, yeah, it's a little different because they may think, wow, you know, I can just get anything here and I can make this, you know, into whatever I want it. And when you're 12, what you want is to not do your schoolwork and things like that. But they become, you know, more engaged reasonably, and they come to understand that process over time. And you just have to trust that it's a team decision and what's going to come out of it is going to be better for that student.
I think that's so powerful, like the way you phrased that you see them turn into their own self-advocates. I think that's so powerful. But it doesn't sound like this is necessarily always an easy process, Ally, it sounds like this curriculum that you guys have been working on will really be a wonderful resource to ensure this. Can you talk a little bit more about the curriculum, about what it is, what you can learn?
Definitely. And I'd like to definitely circle back to just Derek and what you were saying a moment ago. It is definitely not an easy process. There's definitely going to be things that have to be changed in that. You know what I mean? We're going to have to circle back. This is not a one IEP meeting a year type thing. You know, we want to meet as many times as we need to make sure the student is successful. We look at individuals in the school district, the students in the school district that do not have disabilities, that are not on an IEP, and they make decisions for themselves all the time, and they have that dignity of risk, right? And so when we start bringing students in before they legally have to be in their own IEP meetings, because that's what we want them brought in as early as possible so they can start using that self-determination, they can start using those self-advocacy skills, and we want to give them that dignity of risk. We want to respect them enough to show them that they can make decisions and then they can handle those consequences, whatever they may be. You know, you've got a choice to turn in your homework or you have a choice to not turn in your homework. And here are the two consequences. What are we going to do today? This is the outcome of that. Their peers have that. They should have that too. And so we're going to trust them with that, and we're going to set them up for success, whatever that might be. And then they're going to make that final choice on that. And so we are going to set them up to succeed in the real world. And we're going to let them practice that in a safe place while they're in school. And so I think Derek said it wonderfully. And I just wanted to elaborate on that, how, you know, we are going to set them up for success and we're going to show them all the avenues that they can take. But we really hope that this curriculum is wonderful. And if it doesn't turn out to be wonderful the first time, we're going to tweak it and we're going to turn around the second time, because every process is a collaborative process, and we're going to work with our parents and we're going to work with our students and we're going to do everything that we can to support them. But what I know from my own experience and this experience of the parents and of the students that we have worked with in the Alliance is you can never be prepared enough for your first IEP meeting, right? It is so scary. It is the scariest thing. Derek described it when you come into a room and you're supposed to be a part of a team, but really you feel like you're sitting on one side of the table and there's 8 other people sitting on the other side. And you're just talking to a lot of people that feel like you're just one vote and they can outvote you. Whether that's supposed to be how it is or how it's not supposed to be, it doesn't matter. That's the internal feeling. But what we want to do is we want to give everyone enough information and enough resources to feel empowered, to feel ready. So we're going to start with the history of special education. We want to let them know what it was like for children before ours and before you as a person with a disability. We want to set you up with that education. We want to let you know what it was like before you and what it is like now. We want to tell you things, what they mean, such as FAPES. What is free, appropriate public education? What is the Individuals with Disability Education Act? Not the legal term, but in a term and in a way that you can understand it and you can use it. That's important. We do not want to just be shouting laws to you, but we want to give this to you in a way that you can actually understand and use it and give it to someone else. We want to let you know what a least restrictive environment is and what that means to you. We're going to tell you what a referral is, how to initiate a referral, what to expect when this all starts, and then what your legal rights are. Kyla mentioned this earlier, but we're going to tell you what a present level of performance is and how this is the cornerstone of the entire IEP process. And that actually has a longer term that you're going to actually see within the IEP. But we want parents and students to understand what accommodations and modifications are, why they're helpful, and how to utilize these to reach your goals and to make things possible for students, and how this really just equalizes your playing field within schools. They don't make things easier for you, they make things possible for you. And then we're going to go over related services, the benefit, how to utilize them, how to implement these things in a successful way, right down to the location and the times these related services are taking place. We're also going to break down the parent input statement as where guardians and parents alike are an equal part of the IEP team. such as therapists, such as general education teachers, anyone else that may have a spot in the IEP to give updates. So does the parent. So does the parent. And we would never let anyone from the district just skip out on giving us an update, skip out on telling us what's going on. The parent should not either. The parent should not either. So that means the parent should never skip out on the parent input statement. They should always be filling this out as an actual part of the team, as a legal team member. So we're going to show you how to do this in a professional way. We're going to show you how to do this in a respectable way. We're going to show you how to do this without being emotional, which is hard because we are parents and we're guardians, but you're a professional part of the team. So we're actually going to train you how to do this and be factual and be professional. Then we're going to go to goals and data. We're going to tell you how to read data. We're going to teach you how to track data, and we're going to tell you how this has to be done. It's not a choice, it's mandatory, and what this means for the parent. We're also going to have a thorough pre-K section. We're going to teach you why there should be an emphasis and the importance on a communication plan with the schools, and we've actually developed a communication log within this curriculum. There is a transition section, and we'll actually let Mollie talk about that later and the importance of this and the reason why it should start before the legal age. There is a behavior section, which we are very, very proud of, and we partnered with Charles Bird on this so we could have the best information for our Kansas to be able to support students across Arkansas. We have a discipline section, an inclusion section, a self-advocacy section, a part C, ages birth to 3, a dispute resolution. I mean, it just goes on and on, but we want this to be thorough. We want it to be in a comprehensive language to where any person, an everyday individual can pick this up, understand it, and use it anytime they need to. So we're really proud of it.
I think that's what's really going to set this resource apart is the plain language that, like you said, anyone can pick this up and understand and kind of go, what are my next steps? And they can see this and follow through with that. I do want to highlight two of the things that you talked about. You talked about your training parents, but you're going beyond that, right? You're not just training this with the curriculum. Can you talk about the parent support groups?
Yes, definitely. So, I've said this multiple times, but we want this to be a proactive tool and not just a reactive tool. And so with that, we want parents to start before they need it, before they get to the point that it's awful, the student is struggling, we don't know what to do, we don't know where to go. We're having to reach out to different organizations that specialize in special education, like maybe dispute resolution or something like that. We want to start before we need it. So what we are going to do is we're going to focus on 8 different communities. We're going to focus on 8 parents that really want to organize within their community. So we're looking for those leaders, those individuals who are ready to take the next step in their advocacy and activism journey. And what we want to do is we want to train them within this curriculum. Like I said, we had amazing partners that what they covered, this is what they do every day. So we have Mollie Hernandez here, and she does transition work every day. This is what she does. Like this is her baseball. She's the LeBron James of transition services, right? This is her basketball. And so we knew we had to have her because where we do advocacy, we do not just solely pinpoint transition. That's what we want for these 8 communities is we want these individuals to want to organize, and we are looking for support group leaders. We want support groups that focus on IEPs. We want parents to meet monthly. We want them to be going over their IEP journeys. We want them to be able to call upon each other if they need someone to go to an IEP meeting with them and take notes, if they need them to go for support, whatever it is. But they'll also have a monthly meeting, and we are going to help them be successful in that. We're going to train them on how to hold a successful meeting, how to organize the meeting, how to call in guest speakers for their meeting. And all of those are going to be around IEPs, their guest speakers, their organization skills, everything like that. We want want to make sure that these parents are passing out IEP resources at all times, and their community members know where to go to get that. And so Mollie is here today, Kyla is here today. They were both involved in creating this curriculum, and these two were roped into being some of the guest speakers for these 8 communities. So congratulations to those communities.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see where this goes. And you are able to sign up to be on a parent leader, correct, on the website for these support groups. And we will drop a link to that in the show notes. You had mentioned dispute resolution. Can you talk a little bit about that from someone who is not as familiar? What are the dispute resolution options? Can one of you guys talk about that a little bit?
The IEP is a collaborative process. And so when you have a lot of people at the table, disagreements will naturally occur. It's best if you have any concerns to first address them with the IEP team. But, oftentimes parents, when they come to us, they've already done that. And so parents do have a few options for dispute resolution. One of the first things they can do is request a facilitated IEP meeting. And so that's when a neutral third party comes in to facilitate an IEP meeting whenever, there are some challenges about maybe communicating what a student needs. And then at the end of this meeting, an IEP is developed. This should be, requesting a facilitated IEP should be a proactive choice. If a parent anticipates that there might be a difficult meeting coming up, or maybe they need to review something and anticipate conflict, then a facilitated IEP meeting might be a good option. Another thing that they can request is mediation, free, voluntary, and it is confidential dispute resolution, meaning it just stays between the parents and the district. I would suggest that parents make a request for mediation if they're unable to reach an agreement with the IEP team about an issue. And so a mediator is another, neutral third party that, would come in and work with both the district and the parents to problem solve. After the meeting, there is a written agreement that signed by everyone, is enforceable. So that's another option. So facilitated IEP meetings and mediations, they're, free. And so, if parents find that those don't work, they can file a state complaint with the Arkansas Department of Education or a due process. So, first I'll go into what a state complaint is. And so a state complaint has to allege a violation that's occurred within 1 year of filing. And the dispute resolution section of the Arkansas Department of Education will conduct an investigation and issue findings. That's done within, I believe, 60 days. And then a due process complaint alleges violations that have occurred within 2 years of filing. So parents kind of have a bigger window. They can go back a little farther. The parent and the school district have the right to be represented by an attorney. The parties will have a resolution period where they can try to, resolve the complaint before going to a hearing, which is kind of, I think, is a unique aspect of the due process hearings, just so that parents and districts can save and not spend money on a full hearing. But if the parents and the district are unable to, reach a resolution, then it moves to a full hearing. So, we have the parents can request facilitated IEP meetings and a mediation. They're not as scary as filing a complaint. And then, if those don't work, the parent can't file a state or due process.
This all seems like it could be very intimidating for a parent, this part of it. Derek, you mentioned that parents can be intimidated right off the bat. I guess this can definitely go for Kyla and Derek. That intimidation level on this, because it is taking it to an extreme, bringing in more individuals. Do you feel like parents can be intimidated not to do this, even if they think that it's the right thing to do? Are they in fear of retaliation or anything like that?
Absolutely. Parents are often afraid of retaliation if they file complaints or even ask for a mediation or facilitated IEP. When parents present these concerns to me, what I tell them is, you are the best advocate for your child. You are the only one that is able to file this complaint on their behalf. And so obviously, we want to do everything we can to avoid reaching that point.
No, I totally agree, Kyla, that it is intimidating for parents. And what I've noticed is parents sometimes feel like if they do this, then it's an escalation and that they are sort of the bad guys here. And there are no bad guys here. This is parents advocating for their kids and asserting their kids' rights. And that's not anything to feel bad about. Districts understand that, even districts understand parents look out for their kids. And so I try to tell parents that, yeah, it does feel different. It can be a little tough to finally make that call and say, yeah, I'm ready to take that step, but we will be here with you on that.
That's very interesting that you said that, like, you're asserting your children's rights. And I love that. That is a very powerful statement, because our students, our children do have rights. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking out on their best interests. We're looking out for their rights. We're making sure that they can be successful for their next part of their life. We're trying to build them a strong foundation, right? And sometimes we have to make sure that everyone is walking in that same direction to be able to do that, to build that strong foundation for the next chapter. Kyla, I want to ask you something, and this is going to be, especially for the individuals that don't know what's happening or have never experienced this, it may come as a shock to them. But I want to ask you a little bit about restraint and seclusion in the state of Arkansas for our students. Is this still legal?
So legally, children may be restrained at school if their behavior poses an immediate threat to themselves or others. But in the context of a child with a disability, that is not the end of the discussion. If a child with a disability is, exhibiting such behaviors that the district deems it necessary to restrain them, then that is a very serious red flag. That shows that whatever behavior supports and interventions that the team has in place is not working. And when we use restraints, that it is traumatic for a child. And so when a child is restrained by a person who is in a position of trust, a teacher they see every day, that can also affect their educational performance going forward. And so while it is legal to restrain a child, it's not the end of the discussion. The IEP team has to address this behavior in the IEP. Repeated restraints are a clear sign of a due process violation in that regard.
So can you describe me what a restraint looks like? Are we talking about a 5-year-old that is being held against their will by a 250-pound individual? Can it be that? Can it be that? I'm asking because there's going to be a lot of individuals that are listening to us right now that have never experienced this, that didn't know that this was happening in schools. So can you actually describe to us what a restraint is, what it looks like, how they restrain individuals, and how often that this happens in school? Just any information that you have, because where we work with this every single day, there's going to be a lot of individuals that didn't even know that this is happening right now.
The way I think it's defined in the statute is restriction of movement of a limb, head, neck, or the torso. And so sometimes what I've noticed is districts don't even think they've done a restraint, or they try to say we haven't done a restraint because they believe, well, we didn't do something that was within this proprietary system or whatever we were trained in. And so the statute is very broad, that anything that's done to restrain movement of the kid, that's going to be restraint. As far as the systems, what does that look like? What does that feel like? I would say, first of all, as someone who's trained in that, you have that done to you when you're trained in it. And you have to understand that it is always a forceful process, and it should only, and I think this is borne out in the statute, it should only ever be done when it's the lesser of evils, when there really is imminent harm that's going to occur if it's not done. And so yeah, it's very forceful to have your use of your arms taken away from you, and then all of those systems go to more progressive restraints if the lowest level is not working.
In our work and what we've experienced, districts are supposed to use a certain type of restraint to provide the least amount of harm to the child. This maneuver, handled with care, is not always used. So, we'll see children being maybe picked up by their upper arms and lifted and kind of like dragged that way, or we can see what are called physical escorts, which do not necessarily rise to the level of a restraint, but it still involves an adult physically placing their hands on a child and attempting to control their movement. So really what you should be talking to your child about is, has anyone ever put their hands on you? And that's really what will get the conversation started. It's something, I talk about with my parents is, it can be, that simple, because a child will tell you about it.
Oh, so this is actually something that our parents need to be discussing with the children, because this may be something that they don't know is inappropriate or something that they should just be coming home and telling their parents.
Unfortunately, what I've seen with my clients is that they do not tell their parents voluntarily because they think they deserved it, which is, it's unbelievably heartbreaking. And so if you're a parent with a child who has some more maybe intense behaviors, definitely bring up restraint to the IEP team, and make sure that there are some guidelines in the IEP on what we need to do in order to avoid the child being restrained.
So this is also where behavioral supports can come in, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. So this is when, a functional behavior assessment would be useful, a behavior intervention plan, behavior supports that are, in place in the classroom. Maybe if the child needs to leave and take a break, they can do that. Go off, cool down for 5 minutes, just things that, and the reason we mention, a functional behavior assessment is because, what works for one child is not going to work for every child. And so you really have to drill down and determine, okay, what are the student's triggers, and how do we avoid that?
So behavior is not like a light switch. These things are not just happening out of nowhere. We can actually see a buildup. And if we can support these students from the very beginning, we may not get to the point that these students feel out of control in their own selves. We can support them in whatever they need, because if let's say an educator feels like it's out of control for them, just imagine what the student feels like.
Exactly. But behavior is not random. It does serve a function. And so, we need to drill down, what does this child need? Is it a sensory issue? Because, we know that if a child's sensory needs are not being served, that can result in behavior. So it really needs to be a comprehensive, look at what the child needs.
Well, I do want to say that in our curriculum, Charles Berg did an amazing job supporting us with the behavior chapter, and we really learned a lot. He explained to us about the dead man test. We do not want any student just doing in the classroom what a dead man can do. And we want them to be able to be positively engaged and be successful and be active within any activity, any curriculum, and have the tools to do so also. So I'm very impressed in all the information that we received from him. And he also allowed us to really understand how any behavior can be observed and any behavior can be tracked, and that's how we can support the student. And so I'm really just in love with that chapter of the curriculum. It taught me so many things, and I really stand on that pillar of never be too intelligent to learn something new. And I wish that I would have had that 10 years ago when my son started school and we started on our IEP journey. And I think that I would have been able to support him more, and I would have been able to be a more crucial active role in the IEP team. So I'm really excited to get that out to parents, especially because of that behavioral. And I really hope that it can support some of our students that are having to endure these restraints that are going on in the state of Arkansas. So I guess I want to ask you, Derek and Mollie, from being on both sides of this, because Mollie, you were a teacher, correct?
Yes, I was a teacher. In fact, I've worked in education in different capacities. My very first job in education, I was a one-on-one paraprofessional for 2 school years to a child with a significant disability. And then from there, I became a regular classroom teacher. I was a 2nd grade teacher. I moved on from that and worked in literacy intervention, just providing those strong intervention services to help students who were struggling readers. So I've served in several capacities in the world of education, and yeah, I've been on both sides of the table, and I've seen a lot of things. But I also want to highlight the fact a lot of this sounds scary, but so much good comes from these meetings. So I know the intimidation factor is there, but this is also just one of the stepping stones, a scaffold for your child to achieve great and amazing things. So you might be intimidated, but also be excited. You know, it's not all bad stuff.
Right, definitely. That's a great highlight to have also. Yeah, we're kind of bringing the doom, aren't we? Well, you both have such unique perspectives being on both sides of that table, Derek and Mollie. I want to ask you, because we do know that intimidation is there. We'll pump it up here in just a second. We will pump it up. But I want to ask, do you feel like that prohibits some of these students actually being able to be involved in their IEP meetings? Like maybe some of the parents might be white knuckling it, just trying to make it through these meetings. They feel like they get so chaotic sometimes that they don't feel like it is a safe place to be able to bring their child into.
I think so, and especially at the earlier ages. I think, again, we go back to people children aren't involved in their IEP meetings early enough. Schools don't encourage it enough, and parents probably have their own trepidation about that. And so I think that is where I see it, is eventually they're going to get in there, but parents are a little nervous about having them in there at an early age. And yes, the student is not going to fully understand it at first, and they're not going to fully get the gravity of it, but they never will if they can't just eventually pull that Band-Aid off and be in there. And that's, I think, what has to happen. And that is difficult, I think, for parents, especially when you've had an IEP since early in school, and there maybe has been some contention and disagreement with the district, and some history of just difficulties there. Yeah, that's difficult for parents to want to bring kids into, but I think that's where it's really crucial to do it.
And Mollie, what has been your experience in that? You know, I think that it's good to get everyone's experience, especially because these are individualized plans. These are individualized programs. So all of us are going to have different experience. What's been your experience in that?
Definitely. So, you can see different sides to it. I can understand the trepidation of parents, especially in those early years, just knowing how much to let their child be involved. And parents know their children more than anyone to know how much a child would want to be involved or absorbed. So maybe you can gradually introduce them to a meeting. They don't have to be in for the entirety of it, but be a part of it. These people that are attending the meeting should be familiar to the child. There are also other ways to introduce your child to the process. Maybe it's not the IEP meeting, but parent-teacher conferences still happen. Bring your child to the parent-teacher conference. Let them discuss what's happening in the classroom and their grades. So there are things like that you can do in those early years. But as the years move on and the children get older, it's one of those things that, and I'm a mama, I've got teenagers. There comes a point when you have to know they can handle this. Let's let them in. Let's hear their voices. Let's allow them to lead this. And it's hard to let go. I know it is. I also want to talk a little bit about just making sure we've talked some about when the IEP begins and those first meetings in kindergarten. Sometimes IEPs happen as a result of being in school, and maybe sometimes specific learning disabilities start to reveal themselves in school. Other disabilities may happen throughout adolescence through acute injury or accident, or there are just some issues that reveal themselves later on. As with myself, I'm blind, and the red flags didn't start to show up until my teen years. So I like the idea of this curriculum in making sure that a parent can step in at any time. Not everyone's born with a disability. Not everyone is going to have that anticipation of kindergarten's coming. We need to equip ourselves. I love that this curriculum is going to be there for any parent, any student at any age, to give them that knowledge of, okay, this is something we've got to do, but we're not going to have to do it alone. And, to have that knowledge, I think not only gives the parent confidence to walk into a meeting, but it's also going to build the confidence of those students at whatever age. Knowledge is power. So I've loved being a part of this project.
I think that's very important to remember also, that just what you're saying is that every single person's walk is going to be different. And we have to make sure that each person in their journey is supported in whatever way that we can and whatever way that they need it. So I think that's very important. Mollie, since you're on such a roll with so many great topics, I just really want to pack some transition, because it seems like every topic that we've landed on has had a little bit of a transition focus. And it's really because we're building to that, right? We're building to what the student is going to become. So can you really let us know what transition is and what the purpose of that is?
Exactly. I mean, from the point your child walks through those doors, headed off to pre-K or kindergarten, that ultimate goal is graduation and what comes after graduation. Being a part of an IEP team is getting your child to that goal. So it makes sense along the way to think about what comes next. And pre-employment transition services are a coordinated set of activities that are to lead to that ultimate goal of employment. With what everyone wants is, to be successful, to be engaged and part of their community, and employment is a huge part of that. So when we're talking about pre-employment transition services, early as age 14 is when that plan should be implemented. Oftentimes you're going to hear things like, well, maybe age 16. Well, possibly, but if your child has a significant disability, or maybe they're at risk of dropping out, they just don't see the point of it anymore. It's been a struggle since day one. They're just through with it. That's when you need to get those supports in as early as age 14 to look at where we're going next. Don't give up. There's a point to all this. Something's going to come next. But sometimes you might hear age 16, and occasionally that's appropriate, but my background is in intervention, so I like the earlier the better, so let's get that going. All right. Now I want to talk a little bit about the 5 things you should keep an eye out for as part of your child's pre-employment transition plan. You're going to see activities in career exploration. Maybe that's just some interest inventories, looking at what your child likes and what they may want to do, and start exploring those career pathways. What's out there, what's available. It may just come down to discussions when you're out in the community with your child. Look at that job. That looks fun. Wonder how you would get a job like that. What would be the path to that? The second thing you're going to see is going to be some work-based learning experiences. These can happen inside your child's school. They can happen outside. It can be paid or unpaid internships. Could even be a summer work experience program or some job shadowing. So those are things that while your child is still in school can be happening concurrently, stuff that can be going on inside the school building, outside the school building. You also want to look out for counseling on post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. These are schools or technical programs that your child can participate in after school. So we're talking university stuff here. And that counseling can involve anything from career days at different universities, going and visiting universities. It can be counseling your child on, okay, if you want to go to a university, you may need to take the ACT or SAT. Let's look at what accommodations you might need to take these exams and to be college ready. So there's a lot of different stuff that can go into that element of counseling on comprehensive post-secondary education opportunities. Then you might be looking at work readiness skills, those soft skills. I've got teenagers at home. Those soft skills, we all need them. I think I still need them. And that can look at just your competence in social situations, or maybe some financial literacy training, or using public transit to get where you need to when you're no longer within that school setting. And then finally, we want to see that the students are trained in self-advocacy. And we've brought that up a lot. And self-advocacy is using your voice, use it and achieve self-determination, achieve those goals, but also to make sure you are safe in a work setting. So, self-advocacy is so important, and that begins so early. And that, I know that's a lot of stuff, but I just want parents to know what they need to be on the lookout for, and then to make sure that they are aware that we have state vocational rehabilitation services that need to be involved. Contact Arkansas Rehabilitation Services or the Division of Services for the Blind, whichever is appropriate for your child's needs, and ask for them to be a part of your child's IEP team.
Mollie, what if they aren't already signed up, like the school district is not already signed up with Voc Rehab?
Anyone who's a member of the IEP team can request that a vocational rehabilitation counselor needs to be a part of the team. Ideally, I like for it to be the parent, because when your child graduates, that relationship with Voc Rehab will continue. So if you're a parent and your child is not already receiving services with vocational rehabilitation, reach out to them. Oftentimes I hear that they like to come into play senior year. Again, I like it before.
I'm going to back up just a second. And I'm so sorry, but I want to make sure that our listeners really understand that a parent can actually request that before the legal age. They can start getting those transition service. They can actually help their student inside the district.
Okay, so the way it will work is some of the services will be provided through the school. So some of these pre-employment transition services, they can even be conducted in a group activity like career exploration. But there are certain services that if we're getting those pathways laid, that would fall more under Voc Rehab. And this is where it's going to get fun with these acronyms. We've been talking about IEPs. As your child goes towards that world outside of the school, it's going to be an individualized plan of employment, an IPE. So depending on the service might depend on the source of funding. So for instance, maybe your child is still in high school, but they're wanting to do some different college prep sort of stuff, or maybe concurrent enrollment, something that might need funded after the fact. So that's where you want to have that plan in place with Voc Rehab so that they could provide services that might extend outside of school. Maybe it's a blind student who would need orientation and mobility services, some specific navigational training on a college campus or at a technical training center. That might be something that's appropriate to ask from vocational rehabilitation, because they'll be following that student to the next place. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you so much for explaining that to our listeners. I really appreciate that, just to make sure that we can clear it up and make sure that they have the resources that they need to reach out and start these things for their children, make sure that they're successful along the way.
Which, speaking of resources, that's another great resource that is coming out from Disability Rights Arkansas. I know Mollie and Jen have both been a huge help. We're creating just a resource chock full of information specific to transition services. I'm really excited for that to go live.
Awesome. Before we go, we are going to ask you a series of rapid fire questions from Lainey and Ally, just to make sure that everyone can start off this school year on the right foot, especially within the IEP process. So I hope you're ready, and I hope you have your thinking caps on. So we are going to start with you, Kyla. What can families, guardians, or self-advocates do if someone is having trouble making friends within the school district? If they're really struggling with that, and we know that socialization is a key point just within the school process, we want to make sure that people can do that and take those skills outside of school into their career, into post-secondary school, whatever it may be. What can someone do?
Yeah, so the IEP team can actually provide, social emotional learning skills to the child to better equip them in interacting with their peers.
Awesome. So they can actually request that in the IEP.
Yes, that can be a related service in the IEP.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mollie, we've talked a lot about transition. We've talked about IEP services. How can DRA get involved? How can DRA help you with these?
If you have a child that is approaching or is transition aged and you are fearful that they are not receiving the appropriate services, reach out to us. We can connect you with Arkansas Rehabilitation Services or the Division of Services for the Blind. And we can also help you understand, what that transition plan should look like and make sure that your child is receiving those correct services.
I want to ask you about bullying. So, Kyla, if a student is suffering through bullying within the district, is that something that the IEP team can address?
Absolutely. If a child is being bullied and, it's causing him or her to miss school, skip classes, bringing down their mental health, that's absolutely something that needs to be addressed by the IEP team. And, what related services can be given would, maybe a therapist, mental health therapy, maybe going back to those, social emotional skills. And then Arkansas also has an independent statute on what schools can and should do when they receive a report of bullying.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, Mollie, I do want to ask you this question. This will be our final question. Anything on self-advocacy that the IEP can address? Is this something that can actually be addressed by the teachers and that can be worked on with the student in the curriculum?
Certainly, and there are specific curriculums available for instruction in self-advocacy. So if you feel like that is something you need to address with your child, and I'm here to say that is something you need to address with your child, bring it up to the IEP team and look at what's available and how it can be incorporated into their classroom.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here with us today and sharing all this great stuff. We know that we covered many topics, a very broad variety, but we think that it's really needed, and we want to make sure that everybody can start the school year on a great foot, and then as soon as we get this curriculum out, that they'll be able to take it and they'll be able to use it.
Yes, thank you guys so much for joining and sharing all this information and great resources. We hope that our listeners will be better prepared to take on their IEP journey. I do want to remind our listeners that this radio broadcast will also be published on our website alongside the show notes with any links mentioned in today's show. Make sure to check it out. Thank you for listening, and remember to speak up, Arkansas.